Greetings all! It's been about a week now since I made my last video. I haven't posted it yet because I still haven't signed that contract. It seems there's a few things to work out. We're talking about whether or not I'll get a multi-book deal, and it's the Bologna Book Fair at the moment, so things are taking a little while. It's still really exciting, and I'm hopefully having a call with the editor in the US in the next few days, and hopefully arranging a meeting with my editor in the UK before I fly off to Japan. Even though I haven't posted that video yet though, I wanted to make another one before I headed off. Like most writers, it's taken me a long time to find an agent and sell a book. How long has it been since I first started thinking about getting published? I don't know, it's probably not very long, you know. These things take time, I know, but I don't really want to think about it. Anyway, let's just say it's been a lifelong ambition to be able to go into a shop and see my book on the shelves. That's something a few writers I know have been experiencing recently, and it seems like an incredible thing. Anyway, in this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about what makes me write. At some point I'll do another video about how I found an agent and that kind of thing, but for now I just want to talk about the things that influence and inspire me, basically my favourite stuff. Unsurprisingly, I read quite a lot, although I could admittedly read quite a lot more than I do. At the moment I'm reading The Wind-Up Bird Chronicle by Haruki Murakami, and I've also very slowly been getting through Anna Karenina by Tolstoy. We were always surrounded by books when I was a kid. Both my parents are big readers, and so is my brother. When I was very little, we were lucky enough to have these really old copies of children's books around. I think these are from 1909, and there was always a sort of sense of importance about them. The bedside book that my mum liked reading to us was Lord of the Rings. A little bit heavy for a 4-year-old maybe, but it was my mum's favourite book, and something about that enthusiasm, you know, she really managed to convey to us. And I always loved fantasy, although in the end I think I ended up liking Ursula Le Guin a little bit more than Tolkien. As I got a little bit older, I fell in love with the books of Roald Dahl, as so many kids do. These are my copies from back then. I'll always think he's one of the best children's writers who ever lived. There's a period as I sort of approached my teens where I just stopped reading for a while. My parents got worried and tried to get me back into reading by giving me Jane Austen of all things. There's a lot of good things I can say about Jane Austen, but I have to admit Emma didn't really engage the attention of a 10-year-old boy. On the other hand, I always had time for Terry Pratchett. You know, his recent passing really affected me because I started out with the Johnny Maxwell books when I was pretty young, and then I was introduced to Discworld actually through a graphic novel of Mort, and I absolutely read everything he'd ever produced. I even tracked down The Unadulterated Cat just to sort of be a completist. Every time I've gone back to one of his books, there's been something new to discover, or something that went over my head when I read it for the first time as a child. I definitely think that if you've never read a Terry Pratchett book, you're seriously missing out. When I was a teenager, one of my favourite books was Northern Lights by Philip Pullman, the first in the His Dark Materials books. He was really the writer that made me want to write for kids, because he doesn't tone anything down, and if he wants to convey an ambitious concept, it doesn't matter if it's in a children's book. He's going to do it anyway, and I really admire that. Another big influence on me was Slaves of the Mastery by William Nicholson, which is actually the second book in his Wind on Fire series. This is really the book that made me realise that above and beyond the physical locations that you take your characters to, what really engages the reader is their inner journey, you know, the emotions they feel and the interactions between them. In terms of my all-time favourite book, I would probably go for Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. Like a lot of people, I came to it via the musical, which I liked when I was a child. But it's actually the things that aren't in the musical that I really like about this book. Things like Gavroche looking after his two little brothers when he doesn't even know they're his brothers. And I really think this is a good book to read when you're a kid, even though obviously it's famously long, and the bit about the bishop at the beginning is quite hard to get through at first. I think its rewards speak for themselves. My all-time favourite writer is Vladimir Nabokov. He's well known, of course, for Lolita, and he's just a master of prose. Nobody can write quite like Nabokov can. But my favourite book is absolutely Pale Fire. I think just the ambition of the structure of that book is phenomenal. And I think if you're just getting into Nabokov, I very much recommend reading Panin as well, so that you can see the funny side of him. My favourite writer for kids and young adults has got to be Philip Reeve. That beautiful cover. I think that everyone should read Mortal Engines, and I really hope that there's eventually a film adaptation. But I think that Larklight is a great series as well, and if anyone's a big influence on the way I write at the moment, it's definitely Philip Reeve. When it comes to short stories, I think that no one does it better than Chekhov. It's not a light-hearted pick-me-up to read, but if anyone can move me as much as an entire novel in a few pages, it's Chekhov. That said, my favourite short story of all time is The Nightingale and the Rose by Oscar Wilde. It does the same sort of things as The Selfish Giant and The Happy Prince, but I think it hits a lot harder. What else? Well, stories don't just come in novels and short story collections. There's also plays. I think that Othello is a fantastic play. There's some problems with it, like whether it takes place over a few days or over the course of weeks, and it's a bit silly when Desdemona keeps coming back to life to explain more things, but I think the reason I love Othello is Iago. Right? There's no better character that is just completely loathsome, and yet you still find him charismatic and interesting. In terms of modern playwrights, I think Peter Shaffer is my favourite. Equus and Amadeus are both just incredible plays. When it comes to poets, Wilfred Owen is without peer in my opinion. My doctoral thesis is about Owen, so I'm a little bit biased. But if you're in the UK, most people know who Wilfred Owen is, because he's on the school curriculum. And it's been 100 years since the First World War, which was his subject, and for that reason he's in the news a lot at the moment. But if your only experience of Owen is through school, I really recommend reading a bit more about him and finding out that there was a little bit more to him than just his life as a war poet. This may be a bit over the top, but my favourite work in Middle English is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. It's just fun, I think. And if you find the Canterbury Tales dull, I really recommend giving The Miller's Tale a proper read. I still think that's one of the funniest things I've ever read. Okay, this video is getting a little bit long, so let's mix it up with some first-person perspective. Yay! Okay, I'm also kind of a comic book fan. I've been reading comics since I was a little kid. I think my favourite graphic novel is Grant Morrison's pretty recent Joe the Barbarian. I think that's another one that should definitely be a feature film. It's just got great artwork, a fantastic story. I really like it. I was probably a fan of the X-Men for the longest time. I really liked them as a kid, but I'm only very slightly ashamed to admit that my favourite comic book superheroes are now Power Pack, especially with the artwork by Gurihiru. Very nice. When I was thinking about what to say as a favourite film, I was considering being, trying to be highbrow and saying it's Cinema Paradiso or it's The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari or something like that, but the fact is my favourite film of all time is Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's just so funny. I watch a lot of animated films as well, but my favourite has always been The Lion King. I also watch a lot of anime. I'd probably struggle to tell you actually what my favourite animated series is. My favourite animated film is probably Princess Mononoke, and I could tell you what my favourite manga is. That would be Hikaru no Go. I just fell in love with its characters. But in terms of what animated series I like, I probably would struggle to tell you. When it comes to American animated series, my favourite is definitely Avatar. Look at this lovely art book. In Europe, I have a soft spot for Wakfu. Both you'll probably notice pretty anime influenced. Shut up, I'm not a weeb! It's a gift. Gift! Earlier on I mentioned that there was a time that I stopped reading when I was a kid for a while. And that wasn't because I'd stopped looking for stories, it's just that I decided I was looking for them somewhere else. And the main place I was finding those stories was in RPGs on the PlayStation. In particular, my favourites were the first two games in the Suikoden series. This is actually quite rare and worth a fair bit of money now. I think the idea that video games can convey ambitious stories is getting more and more popular these days. Personally, I'm a fan of the Professor Layton series, I also have long had a soft spot for Final Fantasy games, and honourable mention of course to The Last of Us, which is a very celebrated story. I also have to admit that I love playing Kingdom Hearts games, but yeah, story-wise they've become a bit of a mess. Okay, that's really all I've got for you today. This kind of turned into me just talking about my favourite things, but you know, that's really what drove me to write in the first place, so I hope that makes sense. All that's left is for me to test this funny new little camera I've bought for my travels, and yeah, the next time I make a video it will probably be me leaving for Japan. So yeah, it's almost time to say goodbye to all this.
Check out this graffiti mural of Terry Pratchett. What a great tribute.